VinFuture Prize, a new global science and technology prize for humanity from Vietnam. One VinFuture Grand Prize of $3 million. 3 additional special VinFuture prizes valued at $500,000 each. VinFuture Prize honors science and technology work that creates or has a high potential to create meaningful change in the everyday lives of millions of people. Join us to make a change for a better future.
This is the first time that the VinFuture Foundation has collaborated with an international partner in organizing a scientific event, reaffirming its positions and missions to seek out and spread advanced solutions worldwide. And now, to get things started, let's meet our esteemed panelists for today. First, we welcome Professor Ermias Kebreab, Associate Dean for Global Engagement in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Science, Director of the World Food Center at the University of California, Davis, and a member of the VinFuture Prize Pre-Screening Committee. We are also honored to welcome 2 distinguished speakers, Dr. Phat, a distinguished leader in the field of agriculture. He is the former Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam, Chair of the Board of Trustees of the International Rice Research Institute, a member of the Central Council for Theoretical Studies, and a member of the Global Future Council of the World Economic Forum. And last but not least, Dr. Anton Urfels, a renowned senior scientist in water management of the International Rice Research Institute. And now, to set the scene for our discussion today, let's watch a brief trailer that provides an overview of what we'll be discussing.
Water is a crucial component in agricultural production and plays a fundamental role in achieving food security. As the global population rises and the effects of climate change intensify, the vital interdependence between water and food resources is becoming more evident. Addressing this complex challenge requires innovative solutions and global cooperation to secure sustainable food production and preserve essential water resources. To address these issues, the VinFuture Foundation and the International Rice Research Institute are hosting the InnovaTalk webinar titled Water and Food Security. This is the first time ever that the VinFuture Foundation has collaborated with an international partner in organizing a scientific event, reaffirming its mission to seek out and spread advanced solutions worldwide. The webinar will be chaired by Professor Ermias Kebreab, Director of the World Food Center at the University of California, Davis, also a member of the VinFuture Prize Pre-Screening Committee. He is a renowned scholar and skilled administrator with extensive experience in sustainable agriculture and animal science. Professor Kebreab is the Cezanne Endowed Chair in the Department of Animal Science. He has conducted extensive research in developing strategies for using feed additives to reduce methane emissions from livestock and has authored more than 200 peer-reviewed publications. Joining him on the panel are 2 distinguished speakers. Dr. Phat, former Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam, is a reputable expert in the field of agriculture and sustainable development. He currently serves as a member of the Central Council for Theoretical Studies. Since 2023, he has also been the Board of Trustees in International Rice Research Institute, leading important research projects in the field of rice. He is also a member of the Global Future Council of the World Economic Forum for the 2023 to 2024 term, engaging in global discussions on sustainable development. Last but not least is Dr. Anton Urfels, IRRI Senior Scientist on Water Management. Dr. Urfels works at the intersection of sustainable intensification, climate change adaptation, and irrigated agriculture in the Eastern Gangetic Plains. His research navigates agroecological and social challenges in smallholder, rice-wheat-dominated ecosystems where poverty and food insecurity present obstacles and opportunities for significant impact. Water management is a cornerstone of sustainable development as it directly impacts food security, economic growth, and environmental well-being. Seize this opportunity to join our webinar and gain valuable insights from top experts on water and food security.
Professor Ermias Kebreab is the Associate Dean for Global Engagement in the College of Agricultural and Environmental Science, Director of the World Food Center at the University of California, Davis, and a member of the VinFuture Prize Pre-Screening Committee. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. As we gather to discuss sustainable agriculture today, it's crucial to reflect on the pivotal role of water in the complex nexus between agriculture and climate change. Water is the cornerstone of all agricultural systems. It sustains crop growth, nourishes livestock, and enables the very food systems that support our communities. But today, water resources are under unprecedented strain due to climate variability, increasing competition from urban and industrial sectors, and the needs of growing global population. Agriculture alone accounts for about 70% of global freshwater withdrawals, and as climate patterns shift, the availability and timing of water supplies are becoming increasingly unpredictable. This creates a significant challenge for farmers and agricultural systems worldwide. How can we optimize water use in ways that both sustain crop production and protect our ecosystems? Moreover, with water scarcity exacerbated by extreme weather events, building resilient systems that can withstand droughts and floods is no longer just an option. It is a necessity for sustainable development. Today, we are fortunate to hear from two experts who are pioneering solutions at the intersection of water management, agricultural resilience, and sustainable development, Dr. Khao Duc Phat and Dr. Anton Urfels. Dr. Khao Duc Phat has dedicated his career to advancing sustainable agricultural policies that prioritize both productivity and environmental resilience. As Vietnam's former Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, he led efforts to transform agricultural practices in Southeast Asia, focusing on policies that address the intertwined challenges of food security, climate resilience, and rural development. Dr. Phat's work has been instrumental in driving initiatives that enable farmers to adopt sustainable practices while safeguarding natural resources, making him a pivotal voice in global discussions on sustainable agriculture. Alongside him is Dr. Anton Urfels, a senior water scientist with the International Rice Research Institute, who brings deep expertise in water management within one of the world's most water-intensive crops, rice. Dr. Urfels is at the forefront of developing sustainable water strategies that increase efficiency and conservation in rice production. His work not only tackles the water-intensive demands of rice farming, but also introduces practices that help farmers adapt to climate-induced water variability, ensuring both productivity and sustainability. Dr. Urfels' research is critical in addressing the water agriculture nexus, helping us to meet food security goals while respecting the environmental limits of our natural resources. Together, Dr. Phat and Dr. Urfels bring an exceptional blend of policy insight and scientific innovation to the conversation on water, agriculture, and climate. Their work illuminates the path forward, a more sustainable future, where water resources are managed with the resilience and stewardship necessary to support both our planet and its people. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Khao Duc Phat and Dr. Anton Urfels. And first, we will hear from Dr. Phat.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the VinFuture Foundation for inviting me to speak today. As a former Minister of Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Vietnam, and the current chair of the IRRI Board of Trustees, I would like to speak about food security in Vietnam and the enduring and fruitful relationship between the country and the International Rice Research Institute. The first about food security in Vietnam. As you all know, having enough good food is a basic human need. Ensuring food security is a priority task for any government. It is a foundation for social and political stability. It is also a foundation for effective industrialization and economic development of any country. Vietnam has population of 100 million, increasing by about 0.9 million annually. Rice is a staple food for the Vietnamese, and having enough good quality rice is the core of achieving national food security. After the war ended in 1975, Vietnam worked hard to ensure food security. It made great effort to apply new technology and improve the centrally planned economic system. However, Vietnam could not produce enough rice and had to import 1 to 2 million tons of food annually to meet domestic demand. By 1986, Vietnam witnesses a powerful combination of market-oriented policy reform and new technology. The extent of the reform was the introduction of the free market mechanism. Land was distributed to farmers for long-term use. Price and input markets were liberalized. The government provided credit and extension services directly to farm households. Irrigation and rural infrastructure were improved, and the private sector was incentivized. Farmers were strongly encouraged to invest and apply improved rice varieties and new farming techniques. As a result, agriculture as a whole grew fast, about 3% a year, and especially rice production went up almost tripled for after 30 years. And since 1990, Vietnam achieved rice self-sufficiency and started to export. As food security was ensured, large agricultural land acreage was freed to grow commercial non-food crops and develop animal husbandry and aquaculture. In 2023, Vietnam earned 53 billion US dollar from exporting agricultural, fishery, and forestry products. Farmers' income grew, poverty rate went down by 1 to 2% annually. Nowadays, Vietnam agriculture is entering a new phase of development. The agri-food system has to address many new challenges. Agriculture's declining comparative advantage and climate change are the biggest factors. Industrialization and urbanization are offering more attractive income generation opportunities. And next slide, please. And next slide, please. Yeah. And about 1.1 million farm workers, mostly young, have left the sector annually for the last 10 years. Climate change negative impact on the agri-food system and farmers is becoming stronger. Rice farming is also a main source of greenhouse gas emission, requiring urgent measures for adaptation and mitigation. To address these challenges, a new approach to the agri-food system is required. And in 2013, the government of Vietnam announced a restructuring program. The core measure of this program was developing and applying innovation along with continued policy reform. This involved modernizing technologies and value chains to make them more efficient, productive, and market-oriented. The government of Vietnam recently also initiated the 1 million hectares high-quality and low-emission rice program in the Mekong Delta. It aimed to apply new technology and innovation to improve the efficiency of rice farming in the rice value chain, improve farmers' incomes and livelihood, reduce emission, and improve sustainability. Main characteristics of this program shown in this slide. As to Vietnam-IRRI partnership, this partnership began 60 years ago when IRRI's famed IR8 and other high-yielding varieties were deployed to Vietnam's rice-growing deltas. This transformed farmers' lives by doubling or even tripling yields, becoming the spark that ignited the country's vibrant rice industry. Around the same time, the first Vietnamese scientists came to IRRI to study and work, ushering in a rich legacy of capacity building and knowledge sharing. Over the decades, collaboration between Vietnam and IRRI have been extensive and manifold, such as breeding improved rice varieties, conserving rice biodiversity, pest and disease management, research, and policy support. Innovative agricultural practices were deployed in Vietnam, such as tree reduction, tree gains, and 1 must do 5 reduction. These technology packages focus on increasing yields while reducing input and promoting sustainability. This partnership contributed remarkably to the success of Vietnam rice sector development in the last 4 decades. Cooperation for the future. Nowadays, Vietnam is working with IRRI to restructure Vietnam's rice sector and position it for future growth. Initiatives include new climate-smart rice varieties, resilient to drought, submersion, and salinity. Water-saving practices like alternate wetting and drying also significantly reduce greenhouse gas emission. Farm mechanization and post-harvest enhance profitability and equity. Through robust initiatives supported by the government and partners, Vietnam has become a pilot area to test and scale groundbreaking innovation. This includes sustainable rice straw management, which promotes a circular economic model for rice waste byproducts. Data and technology-driven platforms such as geographic information systems and digital tools for monitoring, decision support, and advisory. Direct-seeded rice methodologies that reduce the requirement for water, labor, inputs, and time while providing opportunities for mechanization and service provision. And the Asian Mega Deltas Initiative, led by CGIAR, which addresses climate resilience and mitigation challenges in the Mekong Delta through integrated solutions like genetic gain, water management, and crop diversity. A key focus of the Vietnam-IRRI partnership now is the 1 million hectares program, applying tested innovation and technologies across the whole value chain. Pilot farms have already delivered strong and encouraging results, promising to transform rice production in Vietnam and potentially worldwide. This long-standing partnership between the two partners has been a beacon of innovation, sustainability, and progress for the global rice sector. Vietnam and IRRI's common goal and shared commitment will make them a leading force in achieving food and water security for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cao Đức Phat, for such an insightful presentation. And now, to continue our discussions, we'll turn to our next presentations from Dr. Anton Urfels. He is a senior scientist in water management at the International Rice Research Institute. With his extensive experience in water resources management and climate change adaptations in South Asia, Dr. Urfels will bring invaluable insights to our conversations. Dr. Urfels, we are all eager to hear your perspective on today's topic.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so my slides now. And yes, thanks for inviting me. And thank you, His Excellency, Dr. Phat and Professor Kebreab and VinFuture Foundation for having me to share some perspective. And after these really excellent insights in the previous talk on Vietnam, I want to give a little bit of a more global picture of water and food security challenges to really show how important that work that is happening in Vietnam, but also many other places between IRRI, and a lot of really exciting initiatives that are happening on the ground. And I will have actually just very simple take-home messages and walk you through a couple of global pictures and some new innovation that we're working on. And really, most importantly, what I can't stop to emphasize more enough is that if we look at our water systems, our food systems, our climate systems, they're all interconnected, like what was quite nicely shown in the videos that we saw. And if we want to solve these challenges that we're facing, the threats to our agricultural production, threats to our healthy diets, we need to think them together and address them together. And also when we go in any region, any country, we need to look at the landscapes. And we are really in an era of big technological change. It's accelerating. We see it in the artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of opportunities. We have satellite data. We have all kinds of really novel things that can really help us to get to a better future. But also, we will need very strong and inclusive dialogue to make sure these work for everybody and these really work to address the problems that we have. So that's the main message that I want to bring over. And there's really a lot of exciting things that many of the listeners can become part of in the future, but also, I think, just benefit from. And when we look at the global food security picture, this is an excerpt from the State of the Food Security, the report on the state of food security and nutrition in the world. We see that since 2018, and there was a flatlining from 13 to 18, we've stayed quite flat in terms of reducing poverty and hunger. And we had made a lot of really great progress. Vietnam is an amazing example, but the last years really gave us a big challenge. We've increased the number of hungry people on the world, and that is really something unacceptable, I think, in today's world where the global economy still keeps growing, but we cannot manage to reduce the number of poor people on the planet. So I think that's really an important and big challenge that we really need to address together. And as you can see in the earlier videos, and I have a slide on this here as well, water is crucial for food security, for resilience. On the map on the upper right, you see the areas that are equipped for irrigation. And also you can see in here how irrigation is really an important part of the water cycle, but also that means that the water cycle is really important for the agricultural production. And we see that a lot of the big advances in battling food security come from irrigation and water management. And if we want to make sure we can sustain the progress we've been making on the Sustainable Development Goals, we really need to get this right. If you look at this graph, this is a really cool scientific innovation where two satellites measure the gravity, basically the weight of the Earth, and by understanding how it changes over the years, we can make predictions on where the water is being depleting, basically. So the red areas on the map are large hotspots of water depletion, and you can see there's a lot of these. A lot of times it comes from overuse of groundwater. So already we're seeing that in many places, our agricultural production, which accounts for most of the water use, is also being threatened by causing a lot of environmental problems that we need to rein in the years to come. And that's going to be a very significant and important challenge. At the same time, we know that climate change is also starting to threaten the hydrological cycle, will change it. We already control and affect a lot of the hydrology in the Earth system, but the climate change is going to lead to quite unpredictable changes still. In many places in Asia, for example, we expect that the wet places will get wetter, so we see more floods. The dry places will get drier, we see more droughts. But more importantly, we will see also much more of these challenges next to each other. And figuring out how to grow a healthy diet in between all of these extremes, while the sea level is also rising and the snow melt is decreasing in the mountains, it's really, really going to be a tremendous challenge. And I think Vietnam, for example, is making really great progress on these challenges, but there's a lot more we can do and we need to do. And I think at least the next 10, 15 years, a lot of resources will need to be dedicated towards solving these issues. And when we look more specifically at different crops, this is from the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There's these reports and figures on all kinds of different crops. On rice, you can see that it's not only that we expect more droughts, but also the way that our water system changes will have an impact on pest and disease, on soil nutrients. So really our whole system is really threatened from coming out of whack, basically. We've worked very hard over the last decades and successfully in many places made sure we have stable and resilient production systems. But with all of these changes now, these are becoming less and less sustainable and less resilient. So figuring out how we can make sure these can withstand these shocks, these can work with the new conditions, the new climate, the new pest and disease pressures that we're dealing with is going to be really, really crucial. And there's some good news. For example, here there's a report, a large study of many leading researchers and scientists that was published in 2020, where if you start in the top left here, where you have a lot of degraded lands, and this is basically an assessment of the state of food production and its environmental consequences, and you can see everything is red. We won't go into the details, I'm happy to speak to them. And we want to achieve a U-turn of really restoring the lands and restoring the water systems. Step by step, looking at different factors, we can, in theory, looking at from a global perspective, make that U-turn and go towards much more sustainable and resilient systems. So in theory, nothing should stop us. It's not impossible. It's not doomed, but it's really hard to do it on the ground. So if we want to go from more degraded systems or systems that might become much more threatened in the future to really healthy and resilient landscapes, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to do this on the ground and in the field. And I think places like Vietnam, where there's already quite on the frontier of adjusting to these changes, while having had great success in strengthening the systems in the last decades, we can learn a lot from that, but we also need to develop similar approaches and apply similar approaches in many other places. And to get towards some new ideas and new things we've been doing, for example, in South Asia, in India, but also now in Vietnam, we started doing some of these works. We started collecting much more data and very lean data. So we call them landscape crop assessment surveys. And basically what we try to do is we try to get a better feeling of what is happening in our fields. We actually don't, and that might be surprising, but we don't often really know what farmers are doing on their plots. And once we have the data over a few years of just the basic practices, when do people sow, how much fertilizers they apply, how much irrigation they apply, and so on and so forth, we can then ask AI models questions like, okay, where is the investments in irrigation? If we increase irrigation a little bit, where would these pay off the most? Yeah, and the models can give us spatially targeted answers. And we can also use, and Vietnam has great groundwater data, India has great groundwater data. This is an example from India. We can ask these groundwater data systems that we put into some kind of AI machine learning models. Where do we expect the most unsustainability in use? Where's the biggest threats? And where do we expect the biggest resources that might still be available in the future? In this simple way, I'm happy to explain the details. And if we do that and overlay these, we can start to see that, okay, there's some hotspots, some of these green areas, for example, which make up a tiny portion of the landscape, but they're promising to deliver the biggest gains with very limited investments, actually, and very limited sustainability issues. And this is an area of currently very low levels of agricultural production. We can ask different questions depending on what is the challenge in a certain breadbasket, in a certain rice bowl. So I think we need to go towards much more these type of approaches where we sit together with key decision makers and key policy makers and the scientists and start to think, okay, what are the questions we really need to answer? How can we rapidly at scale get some insights, get some data, and then guide us with that data? But importantly, data is not really that valuable by itself, but what questions we ask from that data, how we interpret that data, and the results from our models, for example, it's really not often that clear cut. And I'm making an example here for groundwater, because groundwater, with the increasing climate change, is becoming a much more used resource because it's easy to use for single farmers. And it doesn't respond. If there's a drought, the groundwater does not disappear as fast, basically. It doesn't respond as quickly to climatic changes. And what we see then is that when groundwater is used more, it starts to decline. But with the monsoon or rainy season, it can fill up again. So the question is a little bit, how much decline on a seasonal basis do we accept? And that might differ on different people that you ask. Somebody with a hand, like a duck hole, like well, like we see here, might have a different answer to that than somebody with a very strong electricity line that can pump from very deep. And the forest might have a different answer. So applying this to many different cases, we really need to bring the data together and bring the people together and understand what questions to ask, how do different people see these sustainability challenges, and then help the data to guide us get to kind of inclusive solutions and accelerate transitions and make sure that we have a kind of guardrails in place as we invest in change. So with that, thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Urfels, for your critical insights on the opportunities and challenge we are facing right now. And now, to wrap up our discussions, I would like to invite all of our panelists back to the stage for a brief panel reflections. This will be 5 minutes dedicated for them to share any concluding remarks before we moving on to the most awaited Q&A sessions. Please join me on the stage.
Okay, well, thank you for both of you for that insightful talk we just heard. I have a couple of questions that may kind of spur people's thinking, and we may get some more questions later on. So to start with Dr. Phat, given your extensive experience in shaping agricultural policy, particularly in Southeast Asia, how can governments and policymakers best support farmers in adopting sustainable water practices that are both economically viable and environmentally responsible?
Well, thank you, Professor Ermias Kebreab, and thank you, Dr. Anton Urfels. Water is the main factor which affect rice and food production, especially in Asia and particularly in Vietnam. In Vietnam, we are using about 100 billion cubic meters of water, and 70% from which is being used for rice growing, and about 10% for other agricultural purposes, and 20% for industry and other purposes. So that's why, and climate change is bringing a lot of challenges in the water management, as Dr. Anton Urfels explained it. And that's why we are trying to bring in new technology and new policy setting in order to encourage farmers and everyone to utilize water more efficiently. And in rice growing, greenhouse gas emission depend very strongly on how we use water. And recently, IRRI scientists, in cooperation with National Research Center, work out a so-called wetting and drying, alternating wetting and drying technique. That technique is very effective. Pilot scheme in Vietnam already show that using this technique, we can save 30% or even more water using for rice, while we can still increase about 20% of productivity. So it's very promising, but we need to have this package used not only in pilot farm, but everywhere, not only in Vietnam. I think it can be used in other, of course, there are many other technology techniques like Dr. Anton Urfels said. And in order for farmers to use this new technology, of course we need right policies. And I would prefer market-oriented one, not subsidy, not really subsidy. Sometimes subsidy helpful, but for long run, we need to find right market-oriented policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Urfels, with rice being such a water-intensive crop, you've talked about some of the methods that we would use. So what would you suggest would be one or the two most promising techniques that can be either applied right now or are in development in the near future that can be applied so that it will help farmers optimize water use in their rice production while maintaining or even enhancing yields in the face of climate change?
Thank you very much. And yes, I think this alternate wetting and drying that Dr. Phat just mentioned, it's really a key technology. Another one, just to mention up front, is direct seeding of rice. Basically, in most cases, that means mechanized seeding without tillage. That depends on the condition of where that is applied. Some places it's not possible because it's just too wet, but in places where there's lighter conditions and not too much flooding, it is possible to use, and can also reduce water use by up to 30%. I think with these two technologies, there's already a large potential. Another third avenue, and that I would like to point out, is management of time, because a lot of times in many places there are parts of the year where the demand for the water from the atmosphere is much higher than in other parts of the year. So often that's in the dry season or in summer, depending on the country, there's different names. But shifting the rice production systems, the planting times, the growing durations in a way that aligns with the times of lower crop water demand, it can also be a key intervention. And in many places, I think the key driver indeed are policies. What we see often is that very low cost of water delivery leads to continuous irrigation during even very hot and dry times, whether that's free electricity or free canal irrigation. So that can be quite resource intensive, and farmers respond to that basically in simple manners. If there's a secured access to water, it is the simple way to not risk any yield loss, to just let the water flow in most places. So better understanding, I think, also how we can adjust these incentives for farmers to encourage uptake of more resource efficient and lower water use technologies would be really important. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to open the question and answer session to the public. So if there are any questions from the public, now the floor is open.
Before we dive into the Q&A sessions, let's take a moment to thank our incredible panelists for their insightful sharings. While they enjoy a short 5 minutes break, we invite you to watch a brief tutorial on submitting nominations for the prestigious VinFuture Prize. Stay tuned for the video and we'll be back shortly.
Greetings from the VinFuture Prize. Please find instructions for the nominator following these steps. To begin, you can access the nomination portal at online.vinfutureprize.org/nomination. Or you can scan the QR code you see on the screen right now to open the nomination webpage. On this webpage, you can download the instructions and the endorsement letter template. In the instructions, you will find the complete nomination form, where you can draft the nomination whenever you have time. Then, you can copy and paste the draft into the online portal. Please click on Sign Up, and upon successful registration, you can simply use your ID and password to log in. After login, please click Nominate Now to start a new nomination form. Subsequently, you can see 7 content tabs on the nomination form. To begin the nomination process, on the first tab, please select the prize category as well as the type of nominee, whether it is an individual nominee or a group of nominees. Then click the Start button to proceed to the second tab. And we would like to call your attention to tab number 5 and tab number 7. On tab number 5, your evaluation, you're invited to give your evaluation of the nominee's invention, including its groundbreaking discovery, scientific fundamental knowledge, specific approach, uniqueness, and advancement. Then you are required to clarify if the invention can be transferred to a product and highlight its most significant socioeconomic impacts. This includes the number of beneficiaries, such as people, countries, and continents. Additionally, please explain how you believe this invention has or will potentially transform the everyday lives of millions, if not billions, of people. Next, please provide information on the history of the invention, such as when and how it started, and who else, except the nominee or nominees, was involved in initiating or contributing to the invention. About tab number 7, supporting documentation and evidence. There are several important documents that the nomination portal and form require, and we would like to call your attention to 3 critical items. The first one is the CV of your nominee or the CVs of your group of nominees if you are nominating a group of people. The second important item is the endorsement letter. 3 endorsement letters or more are strongly encouraged, but 1 is mandatory. The third one is the additional form of nominees. Please be as specific as possible when providing the information. Additionally, you are strongly encouraged to include any valid intellectual properties, publications, patents, or other supporting documents that provide evidence for the nomination. Finally, after filling out and providing all the content in the 7 tabs, please click on the Submit button at the bottom of the page to submit your nomination. If you have any questions or you face any technical issues, please email us at secretariat@vinfutureprize.org. We will be more than happy to assist you in your nomination process. Thank you very much.
Before moving to the Q&A sessions, we would like to make an important announcement from our side. The VinFuture Foundation is now calling for nominations for the 2025 VinFuture Grand Prize and 3 Special Prize. We hope to see you joining us in making a positive impact on humanity by nominating scientific and technological innovations that have improved people's lives. And now, the moment you have all been waiting for, the Q&A sessions. It's your chance to delve deeper with our esteemed panelists. Feel free to actively participate using the raise hand functions in Zoom. We'll unmute you for a direct exchange with our panelists. And for those who prefer a more indirect approach, you can simply type down your questions in the chat box and we'll make sure it reaches the most relevant panelists. Don't hesitate, this is your opportunity to gain valuable insights from our leading experts. It seems like we have the first questions for Professor Ermias Kebreab. Professor Kebreab, agriculture faces increasing pressures due to its carbon footprints. Do you think this focus on emissions overlooks other critical environmental issues? And should research take a more balanced approach? And could this target pressures harm agriculture and reduce future food productions?
Yes, that's a very good question. So at the moment, there's a lot of focus on carbon footprints and mostly on greenhouse gas emissions. But if you look at the environmental impact that we are having for agriculture or any other industry, the carbon footprint is just one of them. So we have, as we heard today, water, particularly freshwater consumption is an issue, and looking into biosecurity and the diversity. So biodiversity is really important issue that we have not really talked about too much. Biogeochemical flows, which is the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus going on into the environment as well. Acidification in the oceans that's going on. So there are a number of things in which our planetary boundaries are being exceeded. So 6 out of the 9 planetary boundaries have we actually already exceeded, and the greenhouse gases or the climate change is just one of them. So yes, I think there's a lot more talk about the greenhouse gases, but we really have to have a much more holistic way of looking at it, looking into whole a life cycle system and taking into consideration other environmental impacts of agriculture or any other industry as well.
Brief. It seems like we are having a lot of questions right now. So now I would like to pass the mic to Dr. Gao Phat. Dr. Gao, can you please tell me what innovative irrigation technologies do you believe hold the most potential for rice cultivations in Vietnam?
Well, as I already informed you that rice growing in Vietnam is using about 70% of water we consume every year. That's why saving water is the most important measure. We are trying to increase water supply for rice, for everything. But I see from my career that increasing is important, but saving is also very important. I can say now is even more important than increasing the supply. And alternate wetting and drying allow us to save up to 30%. That about 20 billion cubic meters every year. If we can apply that package for whole rice sector, and And at the same time, it's not only water, not only cost of taking water into or out of rice field. But when we apply this package, these techniques, we can reduce up to 40% of emission. That IRRI scientists already tested, and in Vietnam, pilot plots in Vietnam show that also. That's why scaling up application of this technology is priority now.
Thank you, Dr. Phat, for your crucial insights. And now we have questions from the audience to Dr. Anton Urfels. Dr. Anton, can you please tell me, rice straw management is very important in delta regions within climate change. How is the strategy is going on translating science to practice to farmers for food security and low carbon footprints up to the year of 2030?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. And indeed, this ties in very much with the emissions that were mentioned by Dr. Phat, that if we want to make sure we reduce the emissions, after the water, the most important component is the rice straw management and the carbon management. In Vietnam and elsewhere, we have really excellent teams. In Vietnam, Dr. Hung is working on this, on finding alternate uses of rice straw. And Vietnam very successfully, also a matter of scaling now, which is happening very rapidly. And I think there's a real chance we can meet the targets by 2030. In other countries, like one of the key global hotspots of rice straw burning is Northwest India, where we see a lot of air pollution from that practice. We're working very hard on that, but certain there's some policy incentives and actually an issue with groundwater depletion that is driving a lot of this carbon crop residue burning in the region. So we're trying to take a very holistic perspective there to try to reduce the pressures while making sure it does not endanger farmer income, which is, I think, the key priority for resolving these solutions. And I do think by 2030 we can get there in many places. And from a global context for the carbon management, I think we need to prioritize key regions. For example, regions that are highly flooded and thus have a lot of emissions. Getting the carbon out of the flooded soils there can help to reduce emissions, or where there's a lot of burning and we really need to improve air pollution. And with these priorities, I think we can make a lot of progress by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Urfels, for your answer. And I would like to send a thank you to also Professor Dr. Dung Nguyễn Khang from Nông Lâm University of Ho Chi Minh City for such wonderful questions. And now I would like to take the discussion back to Professor Ermias Kebreab. Professor Kebreab, could you elaborate on the innovations of the alternative wetting and drying? How does it help to conserve water? And do you think it has the potential for widespread global adoption?
Thank you for the question. So the alternative wetting and drying, or short AWD, is an innovative water-saving technique which was designed for rice production mainly, and typically requires a substantial amount of water for rice. So instead of keeping rice paddies continuously flooded, AWD allows fields to dry out periodically after the rice plants have been established. And this process alternates between periods of flooding and drying and maintaining soil moisture, which we're going to be at optimal levels without the need for excess water. And AWD helps to conserve water by significantly reducing the amount of water used in rice. And by some estimates, it could be up to 30% lower compared to traditional continuous flooding methods. And so by allowing the fields to dry intermittently, less water is lost to seepage and also evaporation, which not only conserve water resources, but also lowers the pumping cost for farmers. And AWD has also been found to reduce methane emissions by limiting anaerobic conditions, which also helps which has an environmental benefit. And in terms of global adoption, it has really a big promise for global adoption, particularly in areas where water scarcity is increasing challenge for rice growers. And the technique has already been implemented quite successfully in parts of Asia, particularly in the Philippines, in Vietnam. There's been quite positive results. Its adaptability makes it viable across different climates and soil types. Although some factors like proper training for farmers, soil monitoring, and initial support for implementation would be really needed if you wanted to have a widespread adoption globally.
Thank you, Professor Kebreab, for sharing such crucial knowledge and insight about such promising innovations. And live questions to Dr. Phat from Ms. Zungle from the Zoom chat box. Dr. Phat, when talking about water use in food productions, do we also take into account the nutrition quality of the food produced, or we only focus on quantity? For example, water need per kilograms of cassava produced is much lower than the needed water to produce a kilogram of soybean. However, soybean could provide a much more nutritionally balanced meal than cassava. Can you elaborate a bit more on this, please?
When scientists are working on different water usage technology, and aim of such research is to find technology which would help farmers to produce not only more, but also higher quality food using less water. And by doing so, we reduce also greenhouse gas emission. So that important. We cannot, ask farmers to apply such technology which not beneficial to farmers. We only have to introduce such technology which both benefit farmers and at the same time to have society to solve common problem like greenhouse gas emission. And of course, quality relate to the price, to income of farmers. We are trying to help them to grow higher quality, higher value food, not only to meet the demand of consumer, but also to have increased income of farmers. Yeah. So we need to find such technology, and we have it. Alternate wetting and drying is one of that.
Thank you, Dr. Phat. And now I believe is the final questions for our Q&A session today to Dr. Anton Urfels. Dr. Urfels, in the context of increasing soil salinity in Vietnam Mekong Delta, what potential solutions can mitigate its impact and ensure sustainable rice productions?
Thank you very much for this quite important and comprehensive question at the end of the session. Before I answer this, I want to shortly make one remark about the water saving that was discussed as well a lot. And because there's so many questions about it. One thing that I'd like to highlight from our work as well in South Asia and India and some other countries is that one, flooding is not always the baseline for rice production. In many places it is, but we need to be careful we target the things in the right places. That's one thing. And I think the second thing is the kind of irrigation schedule and water management decisions, they are often determined by different types of irrigation systems. Some of them are many thousands of hectares large. Some of them are 5 hectares large and can be a single tube well of one person. So depending if you want to scale things, it really depends on this irrigation system and how the water is managed for answering the question of how to scale the adoption of AWD. And that's the main challenge, and we're working very hard on that. So please stay tuned for that. In terms of soil salinity, I think there's a lot of work that has been done in the Vietnam Mekong Delta. I think many countries have actually lent a hand to Vietnam to co-develop different delta development plans to adapt to the soil salinity. And for any of the deltas, I think the key principle that we have to think about is really what fits where, under what conditions, and to be very realistic about that. With the increasing sea level rise, the coastal areas will increasingly become more saline and support less and less crop production. And we're seeing large shifts towards aquaculture, shrimp, for example. And then we always have intermittent zones where we have, for example, dry season. We have similar work going on in Bangladesh, where there's dry season, more saline tolerant production, and during the wet season, when there's less salinity, we have rice production. So it's really, I think, a matter of adapting the timing and the management of the different crops with the conditions in the water. To some degree, we can manage the water, but to some degree, we need to adjust our systems to the changing water conditions. And I think Vietnam is doing a great job at that. And we are working very hard to come up with more productive, more high income, adapted cropping systems that fit the different areas and zones, more high salinity tolerant rice varieties that in the areas where maybe sometimes when there's a bit of a drought, we get salinity a bit too early and we can still have a good production. Yeah, so we really need to be a bit clear and target what type of stress are we specifically facing in any location, and what system, what agriculture system is most fitting to deal with this. Because at the same time, in areas that experience a lot of flooding, you cannot grow anything but rice. So you need to also make sure that rice really can grow to its potential, but other crops and other livestock or fruit trees, whatever it might be, can also make the best benefit of the changing situation. So thanks, and over back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Urfels. And now we would like to have one more last questions to Professor Ermias Kebreab, to the chair of today's webinar, to end the Q&A sessions. So, Professor Kebreab, we have a question sent to you from Mr. Ngo Bazi from the National Law University in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. As I know, California, US is the place that produces more top agriculture products in the US. California has less surface water and mostly use underground water, pumping water. So the question is, in your experiments, could you share with us some points about this?
Yeah, sure. So California does indeed take a lot of water underground, but it's not just the groundwater, because what happens is that on the eastern side of California, on the Sierra Nevada, we have mountains where there's a lot of snowpack. So the snowpack is happening right now. And then in the summer, all of the snow starts to melt, and then it flows down to the delta and the coastal regions. And that's water is being harvested and then used for irrigation purposes. So when there is not enough water, it's a combination of the irrigation water that comes from the mountains and also from the groundwater. And what's been happening is that the groundwater start to get depleted. So in the Southern California region in particular, there's not much more water left. So in fact, farmers are switching crops. So they are switching from crops that are high demand in water, like alfalfa and things like that, and into more sort of desert type of plants. For example, the aloes species are now being important. There's a lot of those kind of species being cultivated and then sort of used for different purposes. So the whole farming system is changing because of the a lack of water. So we in California, we need to be very much cognizant of this fact and be able to manage water in a much better way than we have been before. So yeah, lack of water is really changing how people farm and what type of crops and livestock people are keeping.
Thank you, Professor Kebreab, and I believe that questions had put the Q&A sessions to an end. And as we conclude today's webinar, I want to express our sincere gratitude to our ST panelists, Professor Ermias Kebreab, Dr. Phat, Dr. Anton Urfels. Your expertise and contributions have significantly enriched our understanding of the critical issues we discussed today. We also extend our heartfelt gratitude to our wonderful audience. Your active participations and thoughtful questions have made this webinar truly engaging and valuable. Please don't forget that the VinFuture Foundation is now calling for nominations for the 2025 award seasons. We encourage you to nominate groundbreaking research or innovations that have the potential to positively impact countless lives. As this marks the end of our InnovaTalk webinar series of 2024, we want to thank you all for your unwavering support and enthusiasm throughout the year. Your participation has made it a resounding success. We look forward to inspiring new discovery and innovations with you in the upcoming year. Until then, best wishes to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.